October 2025. My name is Simon Smith and I'm the chair of this meeting. Would everybody like to introduce themselves for the benefit of others who are in the...
Hi, I'm Ian Manning. I'm the County Councillor for Cheston Division in Cambridge City.
I'm Paul Bear Park. I'm a ward member for Milton and Waterbeach.
I'm Chris Poulton. I'm County Councillor for Papworth and Swavesey.
Good afternoon, Christopher Walkinshaw, one of the business representatives.
My name is Nitin Patel. I'm the business rep for the Combined Authority.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Kennedy. I'm one of the university representatives.
I'm Claire Roskin. This is really just a very good test of the microphones, and I'm a business representative.
My name is Annika Osborne. I'm South Cambs District Councillor for Cottenham and Rampton.
Elisa from King's Edges in North Cambridge.
So we proved the point.
Last but not least, Councillor Tim Bick, who's the City Councillor for Market Ward. So thank you, everybody. I'm now going to ask Democratic Services to report any apologies for absence received.
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from James Rolfe, from Councillor Heather Williams and from Christine Ann Rutter.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Just remind you that should you forget to declare an interest either at the start of the meeting or you forget the start of the agenda item, you can always mention it during the course of the meeting. So any declarations of interest you want to raise now? So there are no declarations of interest. I'll just proceed then to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. So could we just go through the minutes and if there's any points that anybody wants to raise? There's one which is a noting that apologies were received from Karen Kennedy, but these were not reported. So do you want to just go through the minutes? So page 1, section 1 to 5, page 2, 6 to 8. Paul?
Just a minor thing in section 8. It talks about Gateway Review unlocking the final 500 million, but I think that's the final 200 million.
It was wishful thinking. Section 9, Waterbeach Railway Station, which we had a very good discussion on, warranted 2 pages of minutes. Section 10 on Barton and Greenway, full business case. Okay. So, in the absence of any other points, and with that particular amendment, can I send the minutes as a true record of the meeting? Thank you very much. So, item 4, which is questions from members of the public. We've received 2 public questions. We will deal with the first one under item 6, the quarterly progress report, and we'll deal with the second one under item 8, Greenway's overall programme. The details of these questions have been published on the website and have been sent to members of the Joint Assembly. And we will ask those questions at the start of the agenda item. So moving on to agenda item 5, petitions. No petitions have been received. So we now move on to item 6, which is the quarterly progress report. This is in your agenda pack, pages 25 to 66. And this is going to be introduced by Neve. Okay. Oh, sorry. Indeed, public question first. Could we ask the person who's asked the public question to come and ask a question?
Yeah, this is Ian Cooper, Chair.
For 3 minutes. Welcome. You've got 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for accepting this public question, which I'm asking on behalf of the Arbury Road East Residents Association. It's against agenda item 6, and particularly relates to Appendix 9, the draft budget. When the GCP successfully passed its 2024-25 Gateway Review, this unlocked the final tranche of 200 million funding for the city deal. Welcoming this additional funding, Brian Mills, the new chair of the GCP's executive board, said, quote, "Our mission is now to complete the job and deliver the joined-up transport network for Greater Cambridge so that people have choice in how they travel, whether they are going to work, school, or to see friends." And to this end, the GCP's draft budget for 2026-27 contains over 60 million future expenditure on greenways. And you can see this in Appendix 9 in columns 4 to 6 under the active travel heading. These greenways are intended, the GCP indicates, for connecting the places you need to go, making the school run safer and easier, and safer streets and roads for walking and wheeling and cycling. Hopefully, these greenways will bring cyclists safely into Cambridge. But will they be able to complete their journeys within the city safely once they have arrived? For as the draft budget indicates, none of the recent £200 million funding is to be spent on cross-city cycle improvements, despite the County Council showing major under-improved sections on its map of designated priority cycling routes, also called key cycling connections under the active travel plan. Please can the Joint Assembly ask the GCP's Executive Board how it is going to achieve its joined-up transport network if none of the GPC's remaining funding is going to be invested in improving the missing links in the cross-city cycle routes?
Thank you. I think, yes. So Thomas is going to answer this question.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the GCP has delivered multiple schemes within the city, including Histon Road, Milton Road, the Cross-City Cycling Programme, and the Chisholm Trail Phase 1. In addition, schemes are in development along Maddenley Road, Hills Road, and the A1134. A number of the greenways include improvements within the city. For example, the agreement to route the Fulbourn Greenway along Mill Road, Riverside, and Adams Road, where we started construction earlier this week. The GCP will continue to work with the County Council and the City Council on how the existing programme we have can work alongside investment from partners and developers in the city. Thank you.
Did you want a supplementary question?
Yes, I am aware of the investment that the GC is continuing to make because I have looked at the analysis that WSP did for them about where investments could be made in the city. But they do not cover the missing links in the designated priority routes identified by the County Council under its cycling and walking strategy.
So, as I said at the back end of my answer, we continue to work with the County Council and City Council on how we can achieve links. However, kind of the programme that we're putting forward has a set budget, and that highlights the improvements that we have within our programme at this time. Thank you.
We now turn to the work of the Joint Assembly. So you're invited to consider the proposals to be presented to the Executive Board, and in particular comment on the following recommendation, which is on page 25 of your agenda pack. And that's to endorse the multi-year budget strategy as outlined in section 12. And that includes detailed GCP budgets for 26-27. And it includes a request for an additional £367,000 to sustain the SMART programme for the next 12 months. So that's where we'll end the discussion and the debate. So I'm intending to structure that debate programme area by programme area. So we'll start with the multi-year budget strategy, which is sections 12 and 13 and appendix 9. So if anybody wants to raise any questions about that. Paul.
Just in section 13.3 on borrowing, it talks about cash flow deficit in 27-28. And I was just wondering, you know, is there an estimate of what that cash flow deficit is? You know, we talk about something significant or relatively insignificant? Do we need to be worrying about it?
Thanks, Chair. And just to introduce my colleague, Rebecca, who's here from the County Council's finance team, which we very much appreciate. So there's work to do to understand the scale of the deficit. And we're working with county colleagues as we speak to do that work. So once that work's complete, we'll feed that back and give you a sense of scale.
Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask if there were any knock-on effects on S106 contributions from the government's withdrawal from the movement of the water treatment works, and how is that being addressed if there are impacts, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. The true answer is we aren't certain yet. Those units will need to be provided in some other part of the city in order to be able to, some other part of our geography in order to be able to deliver the local plan. So we expect those contributions to come forward in some way, but we aren't sure yet from where, and we're working with the Shared Planning Service to try and get a sense of how that will be met. So we don't know yet.
If we can just move on then to the transport work.
Sorry, I had a question.
Oh, beg your pardon.
I told you, you never see the Vice Chair. I didn't, and you don't.
You didn't know, you did several years.
Totally. Yeah, I wanted to ask a bit about both the extra allocation that is invited for the SMART project, and also the status of the city access project. I mean, I've been a supporter of the SMART programme from the beginning. And what I'm starting to wonder as we are in starting the last 5 years of the programme, I'm feeling myself that we need to be more prioritising end product outcomes for the public. And I'm therefore a little bit sceptical about putting extra money into the SMART programme. And I'm really making that point as a means of having the officers kind of say what the consequences would be of not doing that. And in my mind, it's loosely related to the fact that there's one programme that we really haven't even started yet, and that is the City Access Programme, which I am concerned, given the potential for over-programming, gets chopped as the means of making sums add up at the end of the 5-year period. And so I'm feeling that if there was extra money going round, that should either be a buffer against the chop at the end, or it should be added to the City Access Programme as a means of making
Thank you for, was very good scrutiny challenge, which is what we're here to do. So, we have a response. So, officers, you've got the chance to demonstrate the public value for the SMART programme. Go, yeah, go for it.
Thanks, Chair. So we might split this a bit. If I pick up the point briefly on SMART, and then Peter might pick up the point around city access. So I think section 821 describes briefly what we think this additional budget ought to cover. You'll see that much of that is around maintenance of existing stuff. We are required to do that. So we would strongly suggest that we absolutely get on with that. I think why we're asking to continue is to just get more of a sense of what you're asking. So we want this 12 months to make sure that what we're doing is good value and test out that any new projects that might come up, whether or not they're genuinely worth pursuing. So I think we're asking for 12 months in order to be able to demonstrate that, essentially. On the city access point, I might just ask Peter to come in.
Yeah, so I mean, on the city access point, I mean, obviously, this assembly and the board has considered city access heartily over the years, and decisions have been taken about what to progress and what not to progress. I think the position we find ourselves in around city access now is there is an emerging local plan that will be the next step will be taken in the near future with details provided, and alongside that there will be an emerging Greater Cambridge transport strategy, which the combined authority is progressing. We, county council, district, city councils are supporting them in that endeavour. And I think in terms of city access, we need to make sure that any work we are proposing reflects what the emerging recommendations are coming out of that strategy. So I am hopeful, in light of recent decisions at the combined authority, that there will be engagement on what that emerging transport strategy looks like in the near future, and then we can bring forward shorter term proposals that deliver in accordance with that, because we are all satisfied that we are delivering a policy compliant set of projects, which is essentially what we're obliged to do.
Yeah.
If I could just come back on both of those points, really. Just to point out that my scepticism about the SMART programme money is about not the money for the programme, but extra money for the programme, because the extra money of £350,000 isn't the entirety, I think, of what that programme consists of. That is an extra amount that would be added, and that was really the source of my scepticism, not whether the programme continues. And on the city access side, I note that that the budget approach would see £1 million allocated to city access in 26-27, will cover additional technical work. Well, at this point, we haven't really seen any proposals, and I just a little bit worried that the provision for investment is now being cannibalised for other people's policy development. And I'm wondering what value we're getting from that, because it's only £1 million, but it's kind of, it's £1 million less than for actually doing something. And I'm wondering what the value for that for us is.
And I think on that latter point, that's a fair challenge. We're in the point now where we are setting a budget for effectively the next financial year. And we are speculating that strategies will be produced and there's an expectation that work will be undertaken, but we're happy to provide reassurance that we will not undertake work without updating the Assembly. So we're making a budget provision, because otherwise we immediately trip into it's a budget overspend, it all turns red and we have to come along here and plead mea culpa. So at the moment we're making a provision, but before we start engaging in spending that, we will come and raise that with the Assembly in advance. if that would meet with.
Thank you for that. My scepticism about the smart money remains.
And I think it's, you know, whilst I clearly accept it, I mean, I think what I would say, draw to your attention, the work on SMART has underpinned an awful lot of the work that we're doing in terms of other parts of the programme. So just today, half a mile down the road, there's a planning inquiry, national planning inquiry on the Camborne to Cambridge busway. Part of those proposals reflect a new technology from the existing busway to a newer technology that in part has been developed by the SMART work, and I think in the next 2 or 3 weeks, he says hopefully, there will be a further autonomous bus pilot on the biomedical campus that invests in that proposal. So whilst I understand the sort of the challenge on SMART, actually the SMART work stream has underpinned some of the key elements in terms of delivering other parts of the programme. So looking at Histon, Milton Road, the traffic light system investment in SMART has enabled us to deliver some capacity improvements there, which means we could provide more pedestrian and cycling facilities. So I think I entirely understand the challenge. What we're looking for is a 12-month period where we can come back to you with a more significant paper on SMART.
In light of the challenge, I think there's a lot of scope here for you to do a better selling job on SMART, frankly. So members of the public have heard the challenge, but there's a lot of really innovative work gone on under this programme, and it's actually, in the scheme of the entire budget, quite small beer, and you have actually leveraged in more money through grants and support, which is actually an indication that there's government interest in the innovations that have happened here. So could you just tell us a bit more about, give us some more case, make it real, you know, live case studies of work that's happened under SMART, because I think you've been underselling it in your responses so far.
Thanks, Chair. So Gemma Schroeder's kindly joined us, who's a member of the SMART team. I might just give us an example or two around some of that, if she doesn't mind.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to draw your attention really to the Viva City network that we've deployed recently as part of the SMART programme. And I think one of the large things that we're asking for funding to underpin is that continued work. And the benefit of that is it's giving us a lot of information around monitoring and evaluation of the schemes that we're running in other areas. So it's helping us to understand the real benefits that the GCP schemes are providing.
Chair, can I suggest that we agree to come back to you with a paper on this that does the sales job that you're asking for?
Yeah,
thanks.
I think that'd be in order. Councillor Manning.
So I'm not the only councillor in this room who's looking forward to I'm looking at Councillor Machini here, a smart roundabout on Milton Road, but that wasn't what I was actually going to ask about. I was a county councillor, who doesn't know, between 2020 and 21, and I had an exciting career break for 4 years, and then came back recently in May. And when I look at the paper in 5.1, we've got the Chisholm Trail Phase 2 down as amber. Now, when I was last involved in the Chisholm Trail, there were at least 4 phases in the plan delivery. So I guess the first question is, when we talk about Phase 2 here, and apologies for not asking this in advance, it may just be my ignorance, is Phase 2 just everything from Coldham's Lane onwards, i.e. the bit that isn't currently delivered? Right? Does it include the Network Rail to be delivered bit under the bridge, and is that what the reference in 5.3 is to? Do you want to quickly come in, please? Yeah.
It's everything to Mill Road. So it's the on-road section, the on-rail section. It's Cromwell Road, crossing Coldham's Lane. So it's the rest of the trail to Mill Road will then draw
in which case, can I make a gentle suggestion that we, as I say, when we were talking about Phase 2 being the junction at Coldham's Lane. I can't remember which order we raised 2, 3 and 4 in, but 3 was the junction up to the Network Rail bit, 4 was the Network Rail bit. So if 5.3 is correct, it refers to amber being because rail introduced decision. Does that relate to the Network Rail delivered bit?
all relates to the Network Rail stroke Greater Anglia, which is more of the challenge at the moment. around the access to the on-rail running, which is the driver's walkway effectively. Once we unlock that, then the rest of the scheme falls into place.
So just, sorry to keep going back, because I've got another bit as well, something to do with the Chisholm Trail. Why has the Coldham Lane junction not been delivered then in the last 4 years? Because I've still got designs from that back when I was in opposition spokes. That must be either down to the county council, which is us now, was colleagues. Is there a reason? I mean, you can go into more detail outside this meeting if you want, but I just struggle to understand why, given we had designs for that 5 years ago, why that, because that's nothing to do with Network Rail, and neither is the lead up to the...
But the route is. So the entirety of the route, so effectively Chisholm Trail phase 1, Chisholm Trail at the moment works as a functional element, and then to expand that or take that down to Mill Road, there are a number of constituent elements that we would want to do.
I understand.
At one point. You could do Coldham's Lane. That then creates question marks around what you do on Cromwell Road. And Cromwell Road is the classic. Is it a parking? Is it a cycling? So you sort of, what we're trying to do is to say, we know the bit in the middle we can now resolve, therefore we should go back and do all the constituent elements.
That's a really good answer, actually. And to Councillor Smith's point, this is about selling it, right? And if I'd have read that in the paper, I'd have gone, right, I understand what they're doing. They're trying to plan this properly, and they've got the bit in the middle they can't do. But we know we can do the other bits. We actually want to do it as a job lot. And to me, that explains it really well, right? Sorry, 13.3. This is for the non-accountant in the room, so maybe an accountant can explain to me. First of all, there's 2 points. First of all, I don't understand the bit about repayable borrowing. If it can be explained in non-accountancy terms, I'd be really grateful. It can't be fine, but it says here that the county council has not included an estimate of repayable borrowing from the GCP within its capital strategy. So, not included on what have conversations happened and they've ignored. What's the kind of, you got the questions around, has a conversation happened and you've not reached a satisfactory conclusion in your view, and if so, how can, those of us in county councils on the ruling group, how can we help that move along?
So part of so we talk to our finance colleagues on a weekly basis. So we are in regular contact. Part of the challenge here is that we cannot be certain on the timings of the 106 income. So that's why we need to manage that kind of process and go through a kind of very, very detailed exercise led by the accountable body, led by county finance colleagues, to make sure that we can give ourselves the best chance of accurately estimating that. And that's the work that I referred to earlier that's ongoing. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Annika.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to 5, the transport delivery overview, my colleague, Councillor Bear Park, at the last meeting, asked for another metric for us to be able to show how the progression is going for the greenways. I just wondered where we were with the position on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. We have recently completed that work. It will be in future reports. I can give you the figures now. The total size of the network is 150 kilometres. Either completely constructed or already existing is 35.5 kilometres. In construction, we have 4 kilometres right now, which leaves in design, planning, preparation, 110.5 kilometres. We will update that metric in each report and we'll be providing it. Thank you.
Thank you. One is just asking about transport now. Is that okay? We moved on to the transport section. One of the questions is really just a point of to clarify, please. It's around CSET phase 2. That appears to actually be 2 separate projects, really, because one is actually funded and the other part isn't. The Francis Crick bit is actually funded, so we just wondered whether it's actually helpful to present it as A and B or something in the table to show that the whole bit isn't actually at risk. It's just one part of it is still subject to funding. So that's just a point of clarity. My other is a bit more of a substantive point. It's about the fact that there is a lot of amber in these tables. And I wondered what is actually being done to mitigate some of these risks, if we could have a few more assurances on that, given that we are moving to delivery phase. I can see that landowner agreements are often causing some of the delays, and is it possible to put more resource into different things to actually progress some of these things? So I realise that's quite a broad question, but it'd be helpful to have some assurances on how the amber risks are being addressed.
So just on the presentational point for CSET's phase 2, very happy to take that away and change the way that it looks in the report going forward, and we can do that. In terms of the risks, we do explain in the section underneath about kind of what they are in terms of amber and the red. I appreciate that's relatively high level, because if we went into detail on every project, we can get into quite a lot of detail. But we're very happy, I mean, if you have specific questions or members have specific questions about specific projects, to set up briefings and talk through those. And I also, I mean, quite a few of the ambers are related to greenways, and there is obviously the substantive paper around greenways, which we have later on in the agenda.
Just coming back on that, I can see that maybe some of the time you are putting quite ambitious timelines on these, and I wonder some of the time, that can be a good thing to drive the agenda, but also it can look bad because things are being delayed, and then, so I guess it's getting that balance right.
I'd like to ask a question about Waterbeach Station, and I probably should declare an interest in terms of my residing in Waterbeach, so yeah, quite affected by the station relocation myself and my family. So I will say that. We discussed it quite a bit during the last meeting, talking specifically about facilities. I watched the board discuss it as well, and I think all the board members agreed that they all made statements saying that they'd like to see better facilities provided at the station. I was wondering when we can expect to see a proposal for this to come to the Assembly and board for review. I noticed the station doesn't appear again in the forward plan, so just when maybe we can see something on that.
Yes, it's firstly some reassurance that we are working on the facilities and looking into what we can achieve and some feasibility, so we can come up with costs to bring back to the board. And indeed, there's a meeting tomorrow with planning colleagues about what would be required from a planning perspective to ensure that happens. We have also just worked, Spencer Group, who will be constructing the project, are now getting up to speed. We'll be working with them on that work. I would hope to be able to bring something back for the March cycle, and that's what we will work towards. But just we need to make sure that we can do all the technical work in time. So once we know that, we'll make sure that you're aware, both as local member and the Joint Assembly is aware on when that will be coming back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got quite a few more work programmes to go through, so we're going to be here for a long time. Okay, so let's move on then to the next one, which is skills. Thank you very much. That's on pages 26, summary, and the appendices are on 36 to 40.
Thank you. It's great to see the programme again kicking off under Form the Future. I guess our goal or our hope had been that this would be put ultimately onto some firmer funding, sustainable funding, and I wondered how those discussions with the CPCA and others are going in terms of, because I know we're just 6 months in, but it's only a 2-year contract, and I'm sure the end of that will come around quickly.
So we maintain those discussions. They'd continue. I have regular contact with colleagues. In fact, I'm seeing colleagues next week to try and get more of a firm plan around this. So the energy hasn't dissipated. We continue to try and find a sustainable solution, and CPCA colleagues are supportive of the programme overall and keen to see it rolled out more widely across the geography. So that's what we're going to try and do.
Helps on skills. We'll move on then to the smart work stream. Tim, have you got any bones to pick? Was-
Only the one that I picked earlier, yes. No more bones to pick.
Okay, and we'll be getting a sales job in due course from the officers on that one. Housing work stream, going very well. Reception sites across South Cambs, outperforming. Economy and environment. You've suddenly all gone mute. Paul?
Yeah, I was wanted to ask, it was just about the appendix, which I think is in the economy and environment area, which is this report into the local economy. Sorry, I can't remember who did the report. I found the language in this quite hard to follow. I think it's not very precise enough. So it's unclear quite often whether there's the growth rates are a percentage change from the previous period, changes in the growth rate itself, or changes in the actual employment levels. I couldn't follow it.
I agree with you. It was very poorly structured. So I do share that problem with you. Yeah. So could we have
absolutely
shed light on this?
We'll look at it. Part of the challenge is that this has been distilled from a very, 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 very long report written by some experts. So we try and distill it, but I take your feedback and we'll look at it for next time. Thank you.
I think the main message, though, is there's been a considerable slowdown in job creation, both in the knowledge-intensive industries and the other sectors. So we do need to look at that. And I think more worryingly, is that as well, there's been a slowdown in startups. And I think it'd be quite interesting to know a bit more about what's happening and why that's going on. Because all this is about support growth, and if we're not seeing the growth, what are we doing? Okay. So, any more questions then on this one? It says in my notes I've got to sum that lot up. Councillor Bitt was adept at doing this, but it's quite a challenge. What I would do, though, is I'll just speak to the points which we're actioning as a result of this discussion. I do think it's actually been one of the better scrutiny discussions we've had. So thank you for that. Are you disagreeing with me, Claire? Or?
I'll just make a brief comment. Scrutiny of these numbers is really hard from the outside point of view that we have. The working groups help that in terms of knowing more detail about what is going on in the process of uncovering those numbers as well as the scrutiny of those numbers.
Yeah.
So my comment would be, unless any small group of us can get together and look at the quotations that have been had, the contracts that are what they're covering, all the points that we're making are kind of around the edges because overall we've got a table of numbers and we can nod or we can shake our heads, but we can't understand in depth the process that you as officers are going through. And so that comment makes our scrutiny slightly lightweight, I would say, until we get into those deeper groups.
Right, okay. So are you suggesting that we go into subcommittee mode to do that level of deep dive scrutiny? We have a process in the council where scrutiny is done on a forward programme. Scrutineers will identify projects or issues that they want to scrutinise in depth, and then the officers will report on those and they can be investigated and explored. So that would be one way of upping the governance ante.
I think you asked a question there, Simon, somewhere. No, I don't think we need an additional process. I think we just need to be able to probe into some of the estimates that the officers have made and put in front of us. And if we can ask the questions on those things, that would be sufficient additional process.
Okay. I think,
And I've always found any questions are answered very well when you actually have something specific to find out.
If I may, so there will be emails regarding working groups coming out in the near future, which will hopefully provide the opportunity to pick some of these things up in a little bit more detail.
yeah. I think what you're suggesting, Claire, I may have misinterpreted, forgive me if I have, is that what you're perhaps looking at is having an opportunity to ask a pre-scrutiny ask for information pre-scrutiny meeting, so that the officers can come and answer kind of like an in-depth question. Would that satisfy the point you're making?
No, I love seeing them on the edge of their seats in this meeting. It's great.
Thank you for that. Okay, so just there was a question about the amber on the RAG rating. I think there was probably a call for a little more exemplification of actions that the officers are taking to get those to green. I think I'm always suspicious about RAG ratings because they can be gamed. You can put them on a long date and know they're going to overachieve, or you can be ambitious and push the programme and underachieve. So it's a difficult dilemma. And on Waterbeach, there will be a report coming back. Paul, we are very aware of your strong interest in it, and it is a very important, and quite rightly, because it's a very important piece of infrastructure, and it needs to be substantial to serve that big community that's been built there. So we understand that point. And then we're going to have a briefing on the SMART programme. Okay, so can we now just sort of consider the recommendation to the board? Oh.
So I think there was an additional point about the city access. I think there was...
yes, there was indeed.
There was a commitment or an action there that I
yes.
think was undertaken.
Yeah. So I think we're interested in seeing the development of work proposals for that £1 million budget allocation in due course. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tim, for that. So we're just looking then at the recommendation on page 25, which is to endorse the multi-year budget strategy as outlined in section 12, including the detailed GCP budgets for 26-27, which includes a request for the additional 367,000 to sustain the SMART programme for the next 12 months. I'm not seeing any dissent. So I think that's unanimous. Tim never asked you to vote. He just took it by looking at body language. Okay. Thank you. So we now move on then to agenda item 7. And I think we have a question here. Do we? Not this one. Okay. So this is the GCP Infrastructure Programme Biodiversity Net Gain Approach. It's on 67 to 76 of your agenda pack. And the report is going to be introduced by Niamh. So we'll have her presentation first, and then we'll have the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're just going to do some officer shuffling while I do this intro. It is now. So, colleagues here, Thomas, you know, Rory, who's here to support the paper, he's part of the GCP team, and Guy here from the City Council working on all things ecology, so we're very grateful for their time that they've spent on this work. And I guess just on that point, as a point of introduction, I think the partnership with the county and the city and planning colleagues on this work has been really strong throughout the development of the proposals. So that really has made for a collaborative approach, which we always aim for, obviously, but it's meant a lot for this work. So, brief introduction to the paper, Chair. Back in 2022, the board agreed to aim to achieve 20% biodiversity net gain across the programme. This paper sets out a broad framework to try and achieve that goal. It sets it out in a few stages. There's some points to note around some of what's in there. Natural England guidance sets out that there are several key types of habitat that need to be considered as part of any measurement. And as a result of that, the paper suggests we need to work to secure habitat across a number of areas. One of those includes linear aquatic, which I'm told is Guy's special area. And this is required working with Guy and colleagues to look at specialised watercourses within the city. As a result of that work, we've come up with a range of potential options and settled on Sheep's Green to the west of the city being brought forward as the kind of optimal option from a technical perspective. So the paper sets that out in some detail. And just to be really, really clear while we're on that point, the paper does say this, but just to set that out clearly, only where biodiversity net gain cannot be achieved on site, we'll then look to look outside the red line boundary. But that's only where it cannot be achieved, just to be clear. And just on that point, and outside of the linear aquatic space, for area and hedgerow habitats, where ecologically appropriate, we're looking at Cambridgeshire County Council's owned Lower Valley Farm. We think maybe that could be used to look at the required net gain or our aim of 20%. There are a range of benefits around Lower Valley Farm, which are set out in section 2.9. But again, as a point of kind of clarity, perhaps to emphasise that any decision on Lower Valley Farm, or indeed any other potential site, has to be made based on the kind of legal commercial procurement framework that we follow, which is the County Council's framework, as they are the accountable body for this committee. So just to make that really clear, we cannot operate outside of that framework. Another point which is in the paper, but just to make clear to colleagues, we point to a hierarchy in this paper. That hierarchy, that policy is determined by DEFRA, and we are required to comply with that. But just to make that clear in case that wasn't clear enough in the paper. I'll leave that there if I might, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
So Tim had his prior question. So Tim, would you go first, and then and
Brian, but
I'll go along in the order.
We had communications from organisations outside the GCP about this, and I've looked at those long and hard, and I also had some more as well, because my ward seems to include a lot of people who are highly expert on this area of biodiversity net gain. I mean, what I felt, having listened to it all, is that everyone was really quite close together and not necessarily challenging the DEFRA hierarchy, which is a good thing because I guess we're not in a position to challenge that anyway. It's more about how we translate that into practice, I think. And I think we are obviously in quite a satisfactory position, given that we have set ourselves a target which is comfortably in excess of what is expected of us, 10%. And we're going for double, and it looks like in many projects that might be quite considerably more. So there are two things that came out of what I think were put to us, which I wanted to say I think could be translated into what's in the document. And I would like to put those on the table to hear what officers say about those. So the first is the priority for including as much biodiversity net gain as possible on the within a development site. And we have had loose debates about this in the past, and I've certainly been an advocate for that being a really good thing, because we're talking here, I think, about the intersection between the what might be good ecologically, but also what residents and the public visually see as sort of mitigation around infrastructure. But one of the things that came to me from what's been written to us is that, that there are circumstances where that isn't the right thing or isn't the best thing. And I just wondered, so it seems to me that this is described in the report on page 69 in section 2.6. And I just wondered whether that section could usefully say within the development site, unless ecological outcomes would be poorer. And I think people think there about the trees by the A14, which weren't anything to do with us, but were potentially biodiversity net gain that was put in a place where it wasn't going to get properly maintained, and so on and so forth, and the ecological outcome was inferior. So that was the first point that came to me from what was put to us. And the second relates to page 72, section 4.3, which deals with the situation where we are talking about using a habitat hub off the development site. And I found quite compelling in what was put to us was that in actual fact there was a case, given that we are in a market here of different habitats that are able to receive and provide net gain home, that actually choosing a habitat that was closest to the development site would have some benefit. And I can see from my limited scientific understanding that things like soil type and landscape type obviously relate to what you're trying to translate from one place to another, and that if it's close by, you're more likely to have a good match. And so that really would translate in terms of section 4.3 as something that would say something more like, attempt to use the nearest effective habitat bank to each development site, but regard Lower Valley Farm as a default option. And I think that the fact that Lower Valley Farm would be a default option, it was readily accepted by the people who had written to us. So those 2 points, the conditions for the on-site and the selection of the habitat where it is off-site.
Thanks, Councillor Bick. Just a couple of points. I think on your first point, we'll make that much clearer in the paper in the version that goes to the board. So thanks for picking that up. On your second point, equally, if we take note of your suggested amendments following the debate, we can make sure they're weaved in. Also, just to kind of clarify, any of this work, we will look to maximise benefits. So that's the kind of starting point. We will try and get the maximum benefit we can within the rules of the kind of commercial and procurement framework that we have to operate within. So that kind of goes without saying, but we'll make it much clearer in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Annika.
Thank you, Chair. My question kind of follows on from what Tim's been saying. Is there information available which shows the areas retained versus lost in the locations? For example, this section of busway, 20% is lost overall, but 5% is retained, 15% is located in X. Or maybe a map that could show, so it would just make it clearer for people to understand where the net gains are coming from and what can be retained.
That really good point. So that work is under development, and we'll bring it to you as it emerges.
Claire.
I think we're all in violent agreement on this one, so I'll be brief. We've got good visible results already, and I would say it's worth doing on site, even if it's very slightly less effective, so just in the balance of things. The overwhelming majority is quoted in 2.4 is carried out within the boundaries. I'd be interested in whether that's 85% rather than 53%. I hope an overwhelming majority is not 53% and a half. And I would just say the recommendation could be amended to approve 2 or more local sites to be the most cost-effective way to deliver the off-site area and hedgerow habitat, and I'm fully in support of the sheep screen. A good paper just with that little wrinkle that I think we've been talking about.
And Karen, we'll take the question.
Come back, yeah, excuse me.
I'll give you a moment to work that out, to think about that.
Yeah, I've also read the same representations that were sent to us and agree with the points that have been raised already. Just a couple of things to add to those. I think it would have been helpful to see the pros and cons of the different banks that are available at some point, so why we would choose one over the other. I know there's cost and other location and other things in there, so making the case why one is better than the other. There were some points made to us as well about some of the unintended consequences of selling back the excess biodiversity units as well. So I think it would be helpful to have that reconsidered as well, whether that is something GCP would want to do, given the potential knock-on effects of that. Is it not just a good thing to have higher biodiversity net gain, if that is the case, rather than trying to get some financial return on that? So really to consider all the different issues on that. And then finally, I just wanted to ask, was this proposal, it does reference that a draft proposal was discussed by the GCP Landscape, Heritage and Ecology Working Group. Has this been through that group? Because there seemed to be some conflicting from what we were sent as well. It has been through that group. Okay, as it is the proposal, sorry.
So the recommendations were put through that group. Yes, Karen. So thanks, Chair. So just to pick up your points, Clara, I think what you're saying, and the Chair's just reminded me. So in terms of percentage of offsite, we aren't certain, but we think it's about 90. But we aren't certain. So let us do a bit more work, but that's the ballpark. I think around the kind of pros and cons of different areas, we'll include that in the board paper, Karen. The unintended consequences piece. So there will be an analysis done of these various options, and we will go for the option that makes most sense and maximises our outcome. So they'll be considered as part of that work. In terms of the recommendations, Chair, I think what's being suggested is that we could tighten up some of the wording in the proposed recommendations and specifically refer to some of those procurement and commercial legal processes that we are required to follow, if that would be helpful.
Just to come up back, the unintended consequences, I think, were in relation to potentially selling back into the market some of the surplus biodiversity units. So I think reconsidering whether that is an appropriate thing to do or not, please. Thank you.
And can I just add, I do not want to spend your time working out whether it's 90 or 92%. Between 75 and 95 is great.
Do apologise, my mic wasn't on. I'll start again. I'm glad to hear that the aim is still 20% biodiversity net gain. And I want to ask a question about maintenance, but not greenway maintenance this time. This is about the maintenance of these. I guess if it's on site, it's going to become the responsibility of the county council, in the same way that the greenway maintenance will become the responsibility of the county council. Lower Valley Farm would become the responsibility of the county council. And I suppose I have had experience of anything that requires any extra maintenance by the county council. They tend to run a mile. Maybe my county colleagues might want to comment on this. But I suppose the question is, we are looking at these schemes for the long term. The important thing is that there is a long-term outcome for nature and nature recovery. We've seen the disastrous tree planting beside the A14 by national highways. That organisation is not managing to deal with the maintenance of that. On the other hand, I think the County Council appears to me to do quite a good job of the maintenance of the existing busway. So yeah, it's just an assurance really, and whether, from a County Council point of view, in the long term, whether there are any concerns about taking on the maintenance of this for the long term.
Thanks, Councillor Bear Park. So we meet regularly with the Green Infrastructure team at the County Council to make sure that those arrangements are in place up front, and we'll continue to do that through the development of the proposal.
The costs of the units covers the costs of the long-term maintenance. So I think it's over a 30-year period. Is that correct? Yeah. So that's addressed. So unless there's any other late bids, we can just move to the recommendation. You've made it very clear that you support the 20% target, and so any dissent from that. But recommendation B needs to be amended to reflect the points you made about having effectively more local sites, and also to reflect the fact that we go through the legal procurement process as well. So may I ask you to agree to the Chair, Vice Chair agreeing on the amended B post-meeting, so we can't do that wording now precisely, but otherwise consider now approving the recommendation A, B, C and D, B to be amended. Okay, thank you. You're now giving me very positive body language, which is incredibly helpful. Thank you for that. We now move on to agenda item 8, Greenways overall programme update. This is in your agenda pack 77 to 88, which is one of the things that was requested at the last meeting, and the officers have brought this back. Thank you very much for the work that you've been doing on BNG. Thank you very much, Guy. So we have a public question. So I've come to Josh, if you'd like to welcome again. Hello. We met last night, had a good discussion. You are familiar with the drill. Thank you very much, Josh.
The Greenways programme is a complex one, and we continue to offer our support where we can to help the GCP deliver to the highest possible standard. However, with a narrowing window of time and a great deal of work still ahead, we remain concerned about the pace of progress. For Burrows Walk Bridge, the GCP has been able to move swiftly from project inception through design, stakeholder engagement, and now towards engagement and delivery. Where there is good consensus, maintaining momentum is vital. It reduces costs, builds public confidence, and ultimately ensures that infrastructure is delivered. Sidgwick Avenue, part of the Comberton Greenway, has unfortunately not benefited from that same momentum. The trial scheme now proposed is infinitely better than the one that came before. However, it's taken 2 years to develop this relatively simple 500-metre scheme, and the proposals have been delayed multiple times from being brought to the board for approval. There won't be a discussion now until March 2026. As the designs are complete and the principle of the trial has been established, it's unclear why further delay is necessary. We believe that the Joint Assembly and Board should be able to review the overall trial as a whole, while allowing any remaining details to be finalised with the highway team and other relevant stakeholders in due course. In the next 5 months, over 200,000 walking journeys and 250,000 cycling journeys will take place on Sidgwick Avenue. Those journeys are unnecessarily challenging, often unsafe, and for some just simply impossible at the moment. We could change that today. Therefore, we urge the GCP to accelerate this scheme, saving 5 months of additional time and expenditure, whilst delivering immediate safety and accessibility benefits for all who travel on Sidgwick Avenue. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the proposals along Sidgwick Avenue that were brought to the board in 2023 had a significant number of objections which varied in type. Therefore, to ensure a proposal addresses these objections, officers are working with stakeholders and politicians before presenting them to the board. This is a heavily used route, and delivering a positive solution for all users is the priority. Thank you.
So can I invite Councillor Hugh Clough, Cambridge City Councillor for Newnham.
At the last Assembly meeting, I raised the question of cycle and pedestrian trips along the Balk path, questioning the economic benefit of including that path as part of the Barton Greenway. Today, I would like to raise the question of the Haslingfield Greenway mentioned in the update report. I'm basing my comments on pages 49 and 50 of the November 22 business case for the Haslingfield Greenway. Page 49 is shown on slide 1, which is on the screen now, which shows the locations where the counts of cyclists and pedestrians were taken, which is key data in supporting the business plan. In the background, the route of the Greenway shown starting in Haslingfield at the bottom left southwest corner of the slide, with a branch running eastwards towards Hawkston, MC1, and then the main Haslingfield Greenway running northeast, crossing the M11, and then proceeding northeast into Grantchester at Burnt Close, which is MC5, I think. After Grantchester, the Greenway proceeds north towards the Cambridge Rugby Union Football Club at MC3, and it meets the Barton Greenway at MC1. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So slide 2 is page 50, shows the trip data / demand by section. In order to overlay the demand data onto the map, I have produced slide 3, which you could see now, please. Okay, so where demand is marked in red with numbers and brackets on the original map. For example, at the southern end, S1 towards Hawkston has 26 cycle trips and 19 pedestrian movements. At S2, there is activity in Haslingfield. However, moving northwards, S3 into S3, there is a movement drops off to just 4 cycle movements. Similarly, the branch coming in from Barton, S4, has only 1 cycle movement, and S5, the link into Grantchester, has just 3 cycle movements. There is some traffic at S6, Burnt Close, and at S7 has the value of movements in the centre of heart of Grantchester, 148 cycle movements. Going north from Grantchester, S8 has 123 cycle movements towards and from the rugby club. However, there is no count data for the traffic along the Meadows route, which I believe is at least 80 cycle movements per day. My specific concerns and questions are, 1, is the expenditure on S3, S4 and S5, which is the section from Haslingfield up into Grantchester, economically justified? Number 2, will any of the 60 cyclists along the Grantchester Road ever use the behind the hedge route? The ad hoc survey by a resident and then member of the Grantchester Parish Council, Ian Steen, in 2018 suggests they will not, which means that that section could well be a white elephant. And also, should not the route adjacent to the Meadows path now be re-examined? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the slides. So the outline business case, as shown, was approved by the board a number of years ago, I think 2 years ago now. Before construction begins on the scheme, the full business case will have to come back to the Joint Assembly and the board, where we will be presenting the updated statistics and updates on the project, and a decision will be taken at that point as to whether or not the project continues. I just want to also just touch on the methodology. So these are based on the numbers that currently exist, and then adding a percentage uplift to those numbers. We've said before, and that is something that we are assessing, when you put in significant new infrastructure, that can encourage significantly more trips. And that's one of the challenges that we put back to our consultants, to look at the methodology that's used so that we more accurately forecast what those numbers will be. So we are doing that work now, and this Joint Assembly will scrutinise the full business case before any construction begins on the Haslingfield Greenway. Thank you.
We just now move to discussion of the report.
Chair, before we move on, I just have a brief statement to read out.
Of course you do, sorry, yes, sorry.
Yes. Just the Joint Assembly, County Councillor Christopher Morris, who's unable to be present today, has asked this following statement to be read out on his behalf. And just to mention that Councillor Morris represents the Hardwick division of the County Council. His statement is as follows. Paragraphs 2.3 and 2.4 of agenda item number 8 relates to a recommendation to approve a minor change to the Barton Greenway works. In addition to this change, which I support, I would like to ask that the Executive Board also consider a second minor change, specifically the inclusion of an additional raised table to the western end of the village on Combenden Road, adjacent to the perennial housing site at numbers 35 to 45. The addition of this raised table would serve to both enhance traffic calming efforts in an area of the village where vehicles regularly exceed speed limits, as well as providing a safer, more convenient crossing point for pedestrians. This second point is of particular significance given the need to cross the road here to access the pavement and bus stop, and the significant number of residents in the area who are either older and less mobile or have young children. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, in terms of the proposals through Barton Village, they have been through significant consultation and stakeholder engagement. The design has been carried out, including of the proposal, which was actually within the original plans. In terms of adding something in at this stage, that would be require both design and additional costs to be looked at. We're very happy to work with County Council colleagues to see whether or not this can fit within one of their programmes, but at this stage, the works that we have out on site now do not include this change, and it's not within the budget of this change. Thank you.
Can I now introduce you to ask you to introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Of course, thank you very much, Chair. So this Greenways paper provides an overall update on the programme, including the work that is planned in 2026 by a specific Greenway. It also looks at the work that we've delivered in 2025. In addition to that overview, there are 4 specific points which are around the reintroduction of the crossing in Barton, which has just been mentioned, on the Barton Greenway, on the Swaffhams Greenway, following conversations with the local county councillor and representations with the parish, it's proposed that the first phase of the Swaffham Greenways finishes as the Greenway enters Swaffham Bulbeck. We will still be looking at future routes through to Swaffham Prior as a phase 2, but in terms of moving this work forward now, we would like to propose that this phase ends at the entrance to Swaffham Bulbeck. And then there are 2 elements related to the Compton Greenway. The first is around Burrells Walk, where we are due to get designs through very soon, and we would like to go out to do stakeholder engagement on them in the new year. And then the last point is the point on Sidgwick Avenue, where we just highlight the previous traffic regulation order, the responses received, and the fact that we will be coming back to the board in March with a proposal. Thank you very much.
So, questions arising? Yeah, Paul?
Just a question about what you were saying about the Swaffham Greenway. So this will now be kind of phase 1, phase 2. Does that mean that the phase 1 is budgeted and phase 2 is unbudgeted, or is it still is the budget still available for the bit to Swaffham prior or not?
So at the moment, we're proposing the budget covers phase 1, and it also covers looking at what the options for phase 2 are. Because phase 2, in effect, the original route it wasn't agreed, we need to re-establish what that route would look like with stakeholders, and so we can't say that the budget covers what that would be because we don't know what it would be.
So specifically, you're saying there hasn't been agreement locally as the route through Swaffham Bullback?
Correct.
Yeah, I'll let Paul do a follow-up and then you come in, Ian.
So presumably then if the second phase, if there was a way to deliver the second phase, that would have to come back to the board for approval of additional budget in that case.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, just to clarify. So it will have to come back for approval. It might need additional funding, it might not, but we need to do that sort of final work before we. So there is money available. What Thomas and the team don't know is whether it's sufficient or not.
Ian, sorry.
Sorry, this is a banally pedantic point, but 1.5 says links to already delivered schemes such as the Chisholm Trail. I presume it means Chisholm Trail phase 1 on the basis of the earlier discussion. That's really pedantic.
Correct.
For those who are not aware of the Chisholm Trail, it's kind of a cross-city cycle route that, can you just refresh my memory? It's a long route. Where does it formally start, and we know it ends on Coldham's
So Cambridge North Station, and then it flows at the moment through to Coldham's Common.
Yeah. So it's part of an integrated cycleway round that part of the city, and if you've never cycled it, it sort of reveals parts of the city that we've probably never been able to see before, and you realise how closely joined up they are. Wish you could never do this kind of trans-city cycling before the Chisholm Trail. It's a remarkable route. It speaks a lot about the remarkable work the GCP are doing, and of course it then links into Pathways Along the Guided Bus, and you're now beginning to see how you can cycle around Cambridge, out of the traffic, out of the pollution, and get to destinations, Science Park, cottages, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I should just add and say it is actually absolutely brilliant. It's almost a victim of its own success in the way of how brilliant it is. You'll be aware of the route, the issues we've got around the side of the bridge on the Chester side of things. And that's an example of why it's just such a brilliant scheme. Really is.
Christopher.
Just really to build on Councillor Bearpart's comment on the Swaffham's Greenway, as a resident of that area, I guess I should declare that. There is already an existing cycleway off-road almost the whole way, so hopefully the cost of delivering that scheme is not going to be enormous. Swaffham Bullback has some challenges in coming into each of the villages, but there is already off-route cycleway provision the whole way from Quay, well, practically the whole way from Cambridge out to Swaffham Bullback.
Claire?
Picking up on Josh's point, I think he should be on the committee really, but the consultation, the online engagement that we're planning for Burrells Walk has the danger of falling into the same trap as Cedric Avenue. So just if we can keep it as lightweight as is technically possible in the rules, and maybe pass past some of us in advance of it going online, then maybe we can come up with some suggestions that keep it lighter and shorter than the big delays that we get when objectors cluster around some of these things.
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Noted. Thank you. I was at the meeting when that was proposed. It'd be a fantastic improvement. How could anybody object? Let's see. That's Newnham. We'll see. We'll try hard. Annika.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the summary of works for the Greenways for 2026, it's great to have all of the different information there, and from my ward, Cottenham and Rampton, I want to thank the officer for the engagement with the parish councils in relation to the Oakington to Westwick, Cottenham, Oakington, Westwick part of the busway. I just wondered, again, if it could be made a bit clearer, because looking at some of the language, the way it's referred to is some is starting by, some is hoping to be completed by. In a similar vein to how you can see the network across the board, is there any way these projects could be kind of given as a percentage of the design is done, a percentage of the construction is done, just to make it clearer that whether things are moving forward? Because a lot of these projects do seem to, again, repeat the same information again and again without making it clear where we are with the project.
Yeah, so I mean, internally, as you would expect, we have things like highlight reports which present that type of information. So we will look at how we can present that information from highlight reports through to this assembly. Thank you.
So I think the suggestion was that it would be presented as a pipeline, step by step. And I think that'd be very illuminating. Thank you. So seems I'm sensing an enthusiasm for the Greenways programme. I mean, it's going to enhance people's quality of life so much, and its contribution to not just the economic one of getting to places and education and work, but also just for leisure as well.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, and I wasn't going to, but it's all Ian's fault, it's all your fault. You mentioned the Chisholm Trail. I was wondering at what point we can get some update on the plan for phase 2 and what point it's at.
So we'll happily produce a note, but the gist of it is, it's the key section along the rail line. We are dealing with the rail industry. We are not having a problem with Network Rail at present. We're having a problem with the train operating unit, and if the MD's looking, you've just transferred to public ownership, so you might want to think about that. So we have to get the rail operating company to sign off on that section, and we are going through the rail industry process, and it is painful, but we have to go through the process. There may come a point where we look for support from politicians or stakeholders, and if we get to that point, be assured that I will be asking for your support in terms of incentivizing or encouraging them. At the moment, we are making a snail's progress, but we are making progress with that section. Once there is, and we won't get a final, we don't need a final decision on that section, we just need we're pretty much there. Then there will be considerations that will come back to the Assembly around what exactly does the crossing of Coldhams look like, what exactly are the implications on Cromwell, because that will be the key sort of stakeholder and consultation piece, because of course if suddenly we open up, we take the cork out of the crossing bottle on Coldhams Lane, you could put all of the current usage on the existing Chisholm Trail on Cromwell Road, and that needs to be managed. And so I think that will be hopefully the next step that we'll be able to report back to you. But we'll send round a sort of more eloquent update note than I've been able to articulate that.
Is that GRIP you're referring to? Is that GRIP you're referring to? Yes. Yeah, I have horrible memories of Cambridge North Station and GRIP.
Claire.
Following, that was eloquent, Peter, thank you. My view is that now that Mill Road is actually, in my experience, a safer place for cyclists anyway, then just getting that section from Coldham's Common to Mill Road would be a big enhancement, even if we didn't get the further section. Not as good, but if there is any progress within the capacity you've got to make along Cromwell Road onto Mill Road, that would still be a huge benefit.
And we would entirely agree, but because it then becomes a slightly different alignment, there's a slightly different communities that you're impacting, and so we would need to deal with that in a different way. And that's the key question. So if it is along the rail line, we know we need to focus our engagement efforts. If it isn't, it's a wider engagement. But hopefully, the sooner we get to the end of that process, the better.
I just remind members of the Assembly that there is a chairperson's report that goes to the exec board, and I attend and I reflect comments that have been made when these items are discussed at the exec board. So your voices are carried vicariously by me to the exec board. So this discussion is not lost. It is all part of the governance process. And speaking of which, can we just now consider the recommendation, which is on page 86, section 4.1. I'll read it out for the benefit of people who don't have papers in front of them. You're invited to consider and comment on the proposals to note the Greenways programme for delivery to 2026, to approve the Barton Village Crossing amendment to the Barton Greenway, and to approve the starting point of the Swaffham Greenway, and to note online engagement to be held at Burrells Walk Bridge for the Comberton Greenway. And this is basically you presenting this to the exec board as your recommendation. I see approval. Thank you. Well, this is remarkable because we've actually reached the end of the meeting. No one's ever done it this time before, in my memory. So well done me. So date of the next meeting is 2 p.m. Thursday, the 12th of February, 2026. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well done.